Yate, my relatives. Hello, this is Mark Charles. It is Friday afternoon, June 2nd. I'm still nursing my second cup of coffee, and I thought I'd jump on and share a few thoughts with you. Obviously, there's a lot going on right now. I just got back from my trip. I was gone for almost 2 weeks. Our son graduated from college and is moving to his new job, and I spent some time with family back in New Mexico. And I had two speaking events. One last week, or earlier this week on Wednesday, no, on Tuesday in Los Angeles at the LA City College, and then one on Wednesday at the Navajo Nation Museum. So I'm going to talk about both of those briefly. But before I begin, let me do as I always do, which is acknowledge I'm back on Piscataway land. So I'm here in what's now called Washington, D.C., and I am very grateful to be back on the lands of the Piscataway. It's great to be home again. I want to honor the Piscataway as the hosts of the land where I live. I want to thank them for their stewardship of these lands. And I want to just state how humbling it is to be living on these lands today. So yeah, it's just a few updates. First of all, things with my hip replacement are going well. I actually started physical therapy today. I know it's a month after my surgery, but there was a bit of a mix-up with insurance for the first few weeks, and then I was traveling for 2 weeks, so I met with my physical therapist for the first time post-surgery today, and that session went well. I have some exercise I'll be working on, but it looks like my recovery is going well. Things are kind of on track where they should be. I'm walking around a fair amount without my cane, and I'm able to get in and out of the car and walk up and down stairs and get around the house really with very little pain. So I am increasingly growing in my gratitude for this surgery. As I'm being able to walk more normally and get out more normally and have less pain in my hip. The moment I can start running and I can play basketball, that will be an amazing day. But we're getting closer every day. So that's been good. Um, yeah, where do we start, right? First of all, where did the month of May go? It's just already over. And Susan, yeah, hey, thanks for joining this afternoon. I know it's late. My cup of coffee is a little bit lukewarm, but first of all, I'm so grateful to be back using my AeroPress and making a good gourmet cup of coffee. It's good to be back. Oscar Yacht, hey, thanks for joining. Good to see you here. Um, I want to first talk briefly about the debt ceiling crisis. And obviously, there is a lot going on with that. And I want to just share a story regarding that in the chat. If you haven't been following, we were coming up on the ceiling of our debt limit as a nation, and we had passed the budget, obviously, almost a year ago. But when the Republicans came into power in the House, they saw an opportunity to play chicken with the debt ceiling and to threaten to not fund the budget that Congress had already passed, right? As a Native man, I have a lot of experience with Congress and the U.S. government going back on its word. This is exactly what the House Republicans did, and they decided they were going to play chicken with the debt ceiling. For a few weeks or maybe a couple months, Joe Biden stood pretty strong, said he wasn't going to negotiate. He wanted a clear cut passage of the debt ceiling, but as he always does, he caved towards the end. And in my opinion, the Democrats got robbed. That's just and if you read the stories, McCarthy is coming out looking like a real winner in this debate. He got a lot of concessions. They rolled back a lot of COVID money. They got the IRS money to go for more enforcement to be diminished, and they made it harder and added a lot of other requirements for some of the social programs. So anyway, yeah, so the Republicans really won in this, but even then, the Republicans were not fully supportive of this. Actually, more Democrats voted for this bill than Republicans did. And which is really striking because I've talked about this before. It's ludicrous that either party tries to declare themselves the party of fiscal conservatism. Neither party is, right? They're not. When they get someone in the White House and in at least one house, one chamber of Congress, either the Senate or the House, it's like what either party just goes free for all with the checkbook and with the debt. And then when they're out of power, especially when they're out of the White House, then whatever party is out of power, suddenly they're concerned and they're want to be fiscally conservative. Neither party is fiscally conservative. They're not. They are only fiscally conservative when they can use it to block legislation of whatever party happens to be in power. And so right now, the Republicans are playing the fiscally conservative card when they're not. You look over the last several decades at the debt that's increased under Republican administrations, and it is over the top how much deficit they raise when they're in power, both by lowering taxes for the rich as well as by just increased spending, especially on military and things like that. So this whole debate is really, really childish, and is playing chicken, not just with our national economy, but with the global economy. Because, right, a lot of our debt, I don't know what the percentage is, but a lot of our debt is owned by foreign countries and foreign investors. And, the United States of America has a incredibly good credit rating, and we have never defaulted on our debt. But if we were to, there several things would happen. A of which suddenly the world would become very jittery about buying U.S. bonds and U.S. treasuries, and like that would become riskier. But second, the interest rate would go up, right? And so it would actually become very much more expensive for us to borrow. I was actually having a conversation about the debt ceiling with my daughters this morning while I was taking them to school. And we were really kind of getting into it. And I was talking about, what was going on and how the two parties were playing politics with this. And I was telling my daughters, yeah, if I were president, right, if I were Joe Biden, I think Joe Biden took the right stance initially, which is he said, I'm not going to negotiate this, right? We passed a budget and we need to fund that budget. That's what responsible adults do. And I personally think he should have made that case much more strongly to the American people and pointed out that not only was McCarthy being a hypocrite about pretending to care about fiscal conservatism, but he was actually breaking the word of the U.S. Congress by saying we passed the budget, but we're not going to fund it. And again, I'm not someone who's like, yeah, we need to continue to spend exponentially the way we do. But if we're going to truly look at cutting our budget, right, we have to look at our military spending. We have to. Our military spending. And the problem is neither party ever talks about we need to be more conservative with our military spending. And they fund really whatever the hell the Pentagon wants, and even more so. And we already spend way more than any other country on our military, and we just continue to spend there without. And so, if we're ever going to have a true conversation about fiscal conservatism, we absolutely have to address military spending. And so, I would start there. But B, I would have, again, were I in office, I would have said to the Republicans, I am not going to negotiate. And I would have held strong on that, right? I'm not going to negotiate. You passed the budget. You may not have been the House Speaker, McCarthy, but your Congress passed the budget, and you are going to keep your word and fund that budget. And if you don't, you're going to drive this thing into the ground. And, right, this is you doing this. I would have held Congress to their word. And the Republicans decided they didn't want to hold themselves to their word and fund the budget that they had already passed. And that was the stance I would have taken. But The other thing that, again, right now there's all this celebration of, oh, we've averted the debt crisis, and this was a crisis entirely created by the Congress, right? This is what white landowning men do, which is they create a crisis, they solve the crisis, and they expect to be congratulated for fixing the crisis. I mean, this is how low the bar is. And so the white landowning men of the Congress, they created this crisis, they played chicken, and they got the media all hyped up, and then they solved the crisis. If you didn't hear, the House passed the bill yesterday morning, and then the Senate passed the bill last night, and it's now going to President Biden's desk. He's going to sign this new bill on Saturday, supposedly. But yeah, they caused the crisis, they fixed the crisis, and now they want congratulations for averting the crisis, this is how children act. What I would have done, again, had I been in office, is I would have basically mandated that said, from here on out, when we pass a budget, right? When we pass a budget, we are agreeing to raise the debt limit to fund that budget. We're not going to have this same debate twice a year or whenever this new debt ceiling is reached. We're not going to have it over and over again. If we're going to fight it out, we're going to fight it out when we pass the budget. We're not going to fight it out when we pass the budget and then fight it out again when we get to the debt ceiling limit. That just makes it crazy, and it makes the U.S. look very jittery. But Biden didn't ask for that. The Democrats didn't ask for that. And so they've moved the debt ceiling. So now the debt ceiling is raised until after the next presidential election. So it's sometime in 2025, I think, that this is the next time we'll have to deal with the debt ceiling. And I'm sure both parties are very looking at this optimistically of, oh, we'll be in power at that point, and so this won't be a problem. But they haven't learned from the past that the American people actually like to have different parties in power and don't want to give all the power just to one party. And so I'm quite certain we'll be back in this same mode in a few years. And so this instance of this childish kicking and screaming that the Republicans put on this year, yeah, that crisis may be averted. But we just fed the beast, right? We gave the kicking, screaming, crying child their way, and we've affirmed that this kind of behavior gets our attention, and so the same kicking and screaming and crying is going to happen again the next time we get to this place. Not know which party is going to be in power, which one's going to be doing the kicking and screaming, but one of them will, because Congress is learning that this is actually an effective way. The Republicans won by throwing a temper tantrum and playing chicken with the global economy. And so, right, this is so we're raising a spoiled child. And so, yeah, if anyone thinks the debt crisis is over, you know nothing about parenting. You know nothing about raising children, right? You know nothing about any of that stuff, right? This is far from over. We've actually just made it worse because we've given in to the kicking, screaming, tantrum throwing child. And it's just going to ensure that this behavior happens again in a few years. If we want to actually fix the debt ceiling crisis, we have to tie the debt ceiling with the budget, and we actually have to get our spending under control. But allowing the parties to use fiscal conservatism as a tool to obstruct what our nation has already agreed or committed to doing, that's childish. So anyway, yeah, don't let anyone, especially Fox News or CNN, tell you the debt ceiling crisis is over. It's not over. It's just going to come back in a few years. Anyway, so those are some thoughts on that. The second thing I want to talk about is this event I did, and this was just a few days ago. It was on Wednesday. I was at the Navajo Nation Museum, and they had a Long Walk speaker series. So on June 1st, 1868, the Navajo Nation signed a treaty with the U.S. government, which is the treaty that brought us back from Bosque Redondo. It brought us back from this death camp that Abraham Lincoln had put us in 1863 and 1864, and it returned us to a portion of our traditional land, Denete, in the midst of our four sacred mountains. And so every year on June 1st, our nation has what we call Treaty Days, where we remember and acknowledge this treaty that we've signed, which is the treaty that brought us back to our lands. And so it's not uncommon for there to be events in Window Rock and things at the museum. And this year, the museum called me and said they were going to do a speaker series on the Long Walk. And I know the curator there. His name is Manny. He's a good friend of mine. And he wanted to do a series on the Long Walk. And he was exposed to my teaching. We've been good friends. We've been friends for a while. And he knew what I was writing about Abraham Lincoln and what was in my book in chapters 9 and 10 regarding how it was Lincoln's policy of ethnic cleansing the routes of the Transcontinental Railway, which is why the Navajos, we were put into the Long Walk and marched down to Bosque Redondo. And so he asked me if I'd be willing to come and teach about this at this speaker series event. And it was a little bit last minute. I had maybe 3 or 4 weeks to figure out the schedule. But we were able to do it. I was able to do it on Wednesday, the first speaker of the series. And most of you know my speech on this, right? I've talked about this extensively. I've done Second Cups of Coffee on it. There's lectures online. It's obviously in my book on Settling Truths, chapters 9 and 10. So I'm not going to go through that part of it. But what I want to talk about, the thing that was really interesting is, I've given this lecture many times around the country. It's a part of my Doctrine of Discovery lecture. I've also given specific lectures just about Lincoln and laying out just the Lincoln mythology of who we think he is and who he actually was. I'm actually working on a Lincoln presentation right now that I'm hoping to take more nationally in the next 9 to 12 months. But this was my first time presenting this information directly to our Navajo people. And most of the time I've given it to much more diverse audiences, or even to primarily white audiences, or even African American audiences. And so I've spoken to those audiences a certain way. And I had to think through, how do I want to present this to my Navajo people, right? To people who, most white audiences and even most audiences of color, they've never heard of the Long Walk, or they don't know as much about it. And so obviously it's a massacre. It's one of the genocidal massacres that happened. And, so they're upset about that, but they don't know all of the details. And I was going to be talking this week to my people who know personally, right, from stories in their family, the horrors of the Long Walk. And so I had to think through, how did I want to present it? Did I want to do it in the whole light of all the Doctrine of Discovery? Do I want to focus just on Lincoln? What should I do? And so it's not that they would need to be made aware of the details of the Long Walk. That wasn't the challenge. We know those details. What we don't know, what we've never been told or acknowledged or even connected, again, we always, as Navajo people, we blame the Long Walk on General Carleton, who's the general who gave the order, or we blame it on Army captains like Kit Carson, who went through and did the actual ethnic cleansing and rounded our people up and brought us down there. Those are the faces we see when we think about the Long Walk. And we've never highlighted or even acknowledged or even taught that it was Lincoln's policy that did this. And so that was going to be the radically new information for my people. And so I decided to really base the lecture entirely on Lincoln and just focus on the Lincoln content. But I knew I couldn't go directly into just his genocidal American Indian policies. Again, just like almost every other American, our Navajo people were educated in the same school system most other people's were, just not as well funded. But we still went to the same schools, read many of the same textbooks. And, it created this heroistic, even divine picture of who Lincoln was, and he believed in equality, and he abolished slavery, and all this other BS that we teach about Abraham Lincoln in this country. And so I knew I had to deconstruct that first. And so I went through this, the very same order we do in the book, which is I dealt first with his white supremacy and the ways that he completely disregarded the value of Black lives and didn't actually abolish slavery, but redefined and codified it under the jurisdiction of the criminal justice system. I did that first. And then I went into his policies on Indian removal, the bills he signed, the Pacific Railway Act, the Homestead Act. And I went through the order of them chronologically, the hanging of the Dakota War of 1862, the hanging of the Dakota 38 in December 26 of 1862, the Bear River Massacre in January of 1863, the Navajo removal of the Navajo and the Mescalero Apache. Oh no, then the removal of the Winnebago and the Lakota from Minnesota in January and February and March of 1863 into the Dakota Territories out of Minnesota, and then the Long Walk in 1863 and 1864. And when I went through the Long Walk, right, I actually showed them, and I don't have that graphic here in front of me, but I showed in my presentation the picture of the executive order that was approved in 1864 by Abraham Lincoln, creating Bosque Redondo, showing the date and his name as the person who approved it. Just again, my people, we know Bosque Redondo, right? And so when we saw the paper with him creating that, what they called a reservation, but was literally a death camp. I mean, that's damning, right? That's like, holy crap, it was Abraham Lincoln who did this. And then ending with the Sand Creek Massacre in 1864. And then, of course, there was the sharing of the map. And this isn't the complete map because it doesn't have the Bear River Massacre on it. This was a map I made earlier, but we have the Long Walk, or the removal of the Winnebago and Dakota from Minnesota. We have the Bear River Massacre, which is actually in northern Utah and southern Idaho. We have the Sand Creek Massacre and the Long Walk in the southwest, each along the northern, the central, and the southern routes of the Transcontinental Railway. And again, this is the map that clinches it, right? This is the map that's just like, holy crap, this is actually what Lincoln was doing, right? He signed the bills, the Pacific Railway Act to complete the railway. He signed the Settlement Act, allowing people to go west and homestead, the Homestead Act, which let them homestead for 5 years and get 160 acres. And then after that, right, this is when he, and let me see if I have the speech here. Maybe I don't have the speech here. But then in his speech, basically after, and I don't have it there, but the speech 7 days after Sand Creek, when he said, regarding Manifest Destiny, we've entered into this Transcontinental Railway with a vigor that gives us assurance of success. And after Sand Creek was completed a week later, he went before the country and said, we are going to complete Manifest Destiny. It's a done deal. And again, this is nothing new if you listen to me. I've said all this before. It stunned. It was really a powerful presentation to give at the Navajo Nation Museum. Our people received it really, really well. The response was almost overwhelming. We had a Q&A afterwards. If you'd like to watch the presentation, I will give you the link for that presentation. It was streamed on the Navajo Nation Museum's Facebook page. And let me put the link in here for you to watch it. But it was powerful. And not only did we have a good Q&A afterwards, but I was able to stay and have conversation with people. And the comment I heard more than once, oftentimes by our elders, as I talked with people after the event, was people who said, I always believed we were sent to Bosque Redondo because we were creating too much war, right? We were too violent and we were too warlike, and so the U.S. government was trying to control us. Basically, right? We were the merciless Indian savages whose only known rule of warfare was the complete destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions, which is what the Declaration of Independence says. And my people believed that, and they said that's why we were sent to Bosque Redondo, almost like that was justification for it. And they said, but what you're telling us is this happened to us not because we were fighting the Americans too much, but because the Americans and Abraham Lincoln were trying to complete their manifest destiny. And we just happened to be in their way. And I read for them the quote from our treaty signed in 1868, which clearly stated as Navajo people, in order to our commitment in this treaty was that we would not oppose any current or future construction of a railroad going through our lands. That's in our treaty. And to see my people, right, respond of like, I always thought we were sent to Bosque Redondo because we were creating too much war. We were too much like the savages. But to hear that this happened to us, this horrible thing happened to us because the U.S. was trying to complete manifest destiny. And I realized how even healing that is, right? It doesn't change the horrific fact of what happened. But again, it's almost like you can maybe even begin to argue the Long Walk was justified because we were doing too many raids and causing too much havoc and creating we were too savage. And it actually really impacted me to hear that feedback from my Navajo people or Diné people after this event. And I'm going to ponder that more. And it makes me want to share this story even more frequently, because if our people felt that way, is that the way some other nations felt? Is, again, not that we would ever say it justified what happened, but right, when you're told we did this thing happened and you were this warrior nation and you were fighting all the time, it almost is like it's justification of like, yeah, we were causing problems and so they did this to us, instead of realizing, no, they did this to us because they wanted to steal our land. And that's the reason these atrocities happened. So it was really a meaningful thing for me to go back and do that. And it actually is going to help me as I prepare this Lincoln presentation for a more national audience. And I actually want to somehow fit into this teaching that, yeah, we're not Abraham Lincoln savage, right? There's one of the memes, or one of the sayings that we'll see on Facebook from Indian countries, I'm not your savage, right? I'm not your savage. That's not justification for what you've done. It's like, yeah, Mr. Lincoln, we are not your savage. You did these horrible atrocities against us because of your greed and of your white supremacy. So anyway, that was very meaningful for me. And I was very grateful for the opportunity to talk about that and to see the response of my people. And I'm looking forward to thinking how I can incorporate that understanding into my teaching as I go forward. And I thought, again, it motivates me to want to teach this even more, because I don't want any Native person thinking that in any way the violence against our people was somehow justified. And I want to be able to say, no, this was the United States working and doing everything possible to complete their self-proclaimed manifest destiny. And that's why these did these terrific things. And this is why they treat Lincoln as their hero, in spite of what he did, right? Because this is what it means to be a hero of these United States of America, which is you complete its manifest destiny. You prop up its myth of its own exceptionalism, right? This is what makes you a hero here. So anyway, I wanted to share some of those thoughts with you. And it's fascinating, right? I'm thinking through a few of these things, and it's fascinating the way that the nation, again, just even as Native peoples, we were not aware, even though we knew the dates of our long walk, we knew the dates of the Lincoln presidency, but we've never blamed it on Abraham Lincoln, and just being able to connect that policy to him. So I also had a really good conversation last week, or earlier this week on Tuesday. I was at Los Angeles City College, and it's my second time being there. And they invited me back to have a new series that they called their Candid Conversations, Candid Convos is what they said. We filmed it in a studio, in a television studio, and it was an open dialogue between myself and the outgoing president of the college, as well as with some of the faculty and students afterwards. And I'm going to put the link to that. It's on their YouTube channel. So for these two videos, the Navajo Nation Museum video, my presentation starts around the 31-minute mark. 31 minutes and 30 seconds, right around there is where that presentation starts. The first half hour of that is kind of just they just had the camera running, and then it was the introduction. But my presentation starts right around 31 minutes. And then on this Candid Convo section, it starts around 8 minutes, but I've actually bookmarked it in the link I shared. So I welcome you to watch both of these. I love both of them. I love having the follow-up conversation at Los Angeles City College, and I really appreciated having a chance to talk to my own people at the Navajo Nation Museum. So I just wanted to share those things with you, my relatives. I hope all of you are doing very well. Oh, one other thing I want to say, if you have not yet bought the book Unsettling Truths, this weekend, I'm actually doing a special on my website where I'm not charging shipping if you order a copy of my book. So usually I charge a $3 shipping fee if you order a signed copy of the book. But for this weekend, I've taken that off. So if you would like to buy a signed copy of Unsettling Truths, you can get it with free shipping right now from my website. And if you just go to my website, I put the link in the chat there, and you can get a copy of it there. Anyway, my relatives, I hope your second cup of coffee is as good as mine is. And again, with the healing of my hip, this has even more meaning for me. But walk in beauty, my relatives. And may we all learn how to walk in beauty together. Hakone.